I'm Bee.
And I'm Renske.
We are so grateful that you are here.
Welcome to School of Joy.
Welcome back to another episode of School of Joy. And today we're going to be talking about relationships, which is going to be an interesting subject. And we're very keen to sort of talk about two universal laws, one specifically. So I'm going to hand over to Renske to explain the law of reflection.
Yeah, I think law of reflection is really the biggest law when it comes to relationships in our lives. And I think where the law of reflection is being misunderstood often is that we think that when someone, for example, is angry and we become angry as well from that is the reflection, or when someone is sad, that they reflect sadness for us. But that is not necessarily how the law of reflection works. So I think to speak about, triggers in relationship, it's very important that we understand how the law of reflection does work. So the moment that someone else, whether that be our romantic relationship, our children, our family members, our co-workers, our friends, it doesn't matter. If someone reacts a certain way, acts a certain way, we can have a reaction to that as well. We can also be neutral about it. So it can either cause a reaction or we can stay neutral. When it does cause a reaction within us, then that is the reflection. So that means if someone else chooses to, as I said, be angry, or they are judging, and we respond or react to that really with that we're not feeling good enough, or that we are fearful of their anger, that we feel unsafe from their anger, then that is the reflection. So I always say you have to see it as though someone else is simply holding a mirror in front of their face. So the person you're looking at is yourself. They are behind the mirror acting a certain way, but that has nothing to do with you. What it has to do with you is how you look at yourself in relationship to that person. So if we then react with not feeling good enough, then that is the reflection. And I think maybe to speak then a little bit about the law of resonance as well, because that's where we often get confused between those two. When someone is angry, and we do meet that with anger when we also become angry, that's the law of resonance, because that means there's a resonance in our field. We can also say like attracts like. There's the anger in someone else's field is resonating with the anger in our field. So that's the law of resonance. But when we react differently to the other person's reaction, then that's the reflection. And to be able to have responsible relationships, like adult relationships in our life, instead of, childish relationships in our life, it's so important that we do take responsibility for that reflection. So I think that's where we're really going to be talking about in this episode, is how do we take responsibility for that reflection of what the relationship is showing us, whether that be romantic relationship or any other relationship, really. Yeah. So what's your experience in that? Like what do you maybe have an example of that you wish to share about? Because I
So
can also
many
imagine maybe
examples. Where do I begin? No, I really struggled to understand the difference between the law of resonance and the law of reflection for a while. It took me quite a long time to really hone in on those things. But yeah, I think ultimately when we are triggered by someone else from whatever they do or they
Mm.
say, um, that energy is ours. And it actually is a gift because they're showing us something in us that is unresolved. And I think before I would have experienced something from someone else and gone straight into victimhood, like, oh, why are you doing this to me? And that is such a disempowered place to live from. And I see other people in my life now, some other people that are living from that place, and they are creating so much chaos from that perspective
Mm.
of poor me victim mentality. Um, and I mean, I sympathize. That was me. But I think when we step into radical responsibility of what we are holding, what we are experiencing, um, there's so much power there. And it isn't easy. I mentioned in my Joy Spark on our last episode that there was something I was really struggling with for quite a while, and that was a really big abandonment wound that I have been really struggling with, where I feel that other people abandon me. That is an energy that I hold. And that has shown up in so many of my relationships. Fortunately, not with Tom, my husband, but in so many of my other relationships, in different ways, that has been reflected to me. Um, and that was a really, really deep wound, and I have really connected with some child parts there that really needed acknowledging. I wasn't even aware of this wound
Mm.
for but yeah, 35 years. I only have just connected with that very recently in the last few months. And I now understand that I really need to hold myself and hold that child part in with so much compassion because it is a really deep wound and it has been playing out in my relationships for years. And that really has been the law of reflection, like sort of I was conscious of all these triggers in the different relationships, and I couldn't quite piece together all the different parts. They seemed to be sort of similar themes, and the common theme, of course, was me.
Mm.
So yeah, diving deep into that has been really, really helpful.
Mm. I think especially we talk a lot about, high sensitivity. Um, and what comes to me at the moment as well is especially as highly sensitive people, it's so empowering to take that radical responsibility for how we're feeling because from my experience, I know that, I have had a similar experience to you, being the victim, pointing outside of ourselves, like, or they or you make me feel this way, which is quite understandable, especially when you're so highly sensitive. I mean, like when we go out into bigger crowds, we get triggered so quickly and overwhelmed with all the energy that we're absorbing from other people. But it is actually sitting in our field then as well. So, um, I guess I'm pointing this out that because, like, if you want to really transform your highly sensitivity into a gift, you need to take radical responsibility for how you are triggered in relationship to other people, whether that be one person or groups. Um, if you start doing that, then you're not the victim of the label high sensitivity, but you're actually stepping into the power of your high sensitivity. And that's,
Mm.
I think for me, that's been the biggest shift in stepping into that power of taking responsibility for my energy, and that the trigger is never caused by something outside of me. Yeah, but it always comes from within. Yeah. So I love that that lately, that you've been tying sort of knots together, and you've seen, the common theme in that, and taking responsibility for that. That's so transformational. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not always easy to see, like I think I've been taking radical responsibility for myself for a long time. So um it's not an easy thing sometimes to uncover. I feel I have a lot of self-awareness, and then this thing kind of blindsided me, like, oh wow, actually this is a really huge wound. Um but the gift in it, if you can uncover it, and this is, I guess, coming back to the power of community in a different episode that we talked about, and seeking support, and lots of the other tools that we've talked about in other episodes. But there is so much power. If you are listening to this and it's triggering you, maybe, oh yeah, actually that kind of, like, actually, if you're being triggered by this episode, if what we're saying, then it probably is the case that there is something in your field that you're being asked to explore. And maybe it is that you need to take a little bit more radical responsibility for what you are experiencing in your relationships. Um and and I think, there is so much power. If you think that you don't have power in your life, then this is the thing to look at,
Mm.
right? Yeah. Do you have any experiences specifically around kind of relationships, in this regard?
Yeah, I mean, um, I truly believe that, our family is meant to trigger us
Yeah.
because they're part of the same group consciousness. And we are asked to resolve unresolved energy in our group consciousness. How can we resolve that? By becoming aware of what is unresolved. How do we do that? In this life as a human being, is we're being triggered so that we can actually be aware of what is unresolved, and then we can start to work with it to resolve that. So I truly believe that family and romantic relationships, are meant to trigger us. Um, and that's the gift, as you said before, that's the gift. So I think within my family, I've resolved quite a lot in the last years. That yes, every now and then I still get triggered, and I go into reaction, but not so much anymore. There's much more acceptance. I think my sister has been quite a big mirror and the biggest gift within my family. Probably the sort of biggest example is when I decided after 4 years in New Zealand, it was time to move back to the Netherlands. I was very joyful about that decision in a way. That I was gonna, spend time with my family and friends again in the Netherlands. And my sister, for her reasons, could not join in that joy, that enjoyment, that happiness. And I don't hold judgment anymore around that. I think the biggest reflection then was that my my inner child was feeling rejected. Little Renske was like, how can you close the door when when I decide to come back to the Netherlands? Like, how can you not be joyful about that? I felt completely rejected. But by then, I was so deep already into the self-mastery that I quickly realized, hey, I'm going into reaction. She's giving me this big gift to work with this. Now you say, abandonment wound, like probably without me knowing it at the time, it was a similar wound, of me being afraid that I was going to be abandoned and rejected. So I worked with that, and I think that the result of that, with working with it that way, taking responsibility for it, not focusing on my sister anymore, but focusing on me instead, I then felt neutral about whether she was going to show up or she wasn't going to show up when I was back. And I think that's been just really, really healing for me to come into an acceptance that each soul chooses to have an experience here on earth, and it's not for me to understand the path of another soul. Like, it's not for me to understand the path that my sister has chosen. So there's much more acceptance of my sister, but that's only because I have more acceptance for me. Like, I was able to accept that part that felt abandoned and rejected, and therefore it's automatically, it's a result that you can then hold that for others as well, that level of acceptance. So therefore, that's an example of a big gift that one of my family members has given me, me learning to take back my power there. Yeah.
And what was your process? Because I can imagine people are hearing that specific experience and saying, "Oh, well, that would make me feel abandoned too." Yeah. Like, so what is your process from getting from that place of the trigger to, feeling complete acceptance?
I have to go back to that because it's been quite a couple years now. Like 5 years, 4 years ago, 4 years. I do remember myself, like, in the beginning, I had to really feel it. I had to, like, the episode where we talk about emotions, I had to go through that, like, really allowing myself to feel the feeling. So I remember a moment where I was curled up on the floor in my room by myself in the house, crying, like bawling my eyes out, really allowing myself to feel what that part was holding, that aspect of fear of rejection, what that aspect was holding. I used, like, the shaking, the dancing we've been talking about, the ugly cry, while still asking this deeper part of me, my spirit, to hold me whilst and the enlightened masters, ascended masters, to hold the space. So there was a level of space holding, observance, whilst I was feeling the feelings, which I think why I'm saying that, why that is important, is because otherwise we can become completely overwhelmed by it, and we can get numb and not move forward from that. We can actually become the victim of that emotion. So I think learning, to open to that deeper support has helped me to be able to feel the emotion, yet also move forward from that. And I think then quite soon I felt I needed a bit more support. So I then decided to do some universal ray healings, which works directly with the consciousness. It works directly with the energy rather than through the mind. You go deeper and work with the energy directly. And I remember you have to pull 3 cards with the universal rays. And the last card is sort of the card of the unresolved karma that you work towards to resolve. And there's many cards to choose from, and I not randomly, of course, picked the card family love. So it was really, really, really clear that I was supported and guided to resolve a lot of energy around that, and then come into more loving acceptance within myself and therefore within the family as well. Um, Done lots of meditation, and in a way that I was connecting more with my receiving energy. So I just it's in the self mastery course we call that like connecting with the voidal energy, simply just dropping deep in our heart space, uh, and just being, really breathing and being and receiving. So did lots of that. Uh, until I felt there was more clarity than in my field again. Through the universal rays, you also work with the statement to the universe that you break and revoke. So it's a decree, we call it. So those are all like steps and tools that I've used to then eventually feel neutral about, yeah, again, whether she was or was not gonna show up. I wasn't attached to her reaction anymore. Um, yeah. So that's been my process back then. Yeah. What about yourself? Do you have an example for yourself?
Well, I mean, I've shared it before, but the biggest one was with my dad, and that was a huge shift. Um, yeah, I think it's interesting. I think perhaps in my experience recently with this abandonment wound and even the stuff with my dad, I think this is where for me divine timing really comes in, because that abandonment wound has been laying there inside me for all this time, and it felt like the right time for it to come up. Um, in so many ways, it was just the right time to really get with the pain of it. And likewise with my dad, because I had been trying to shift that energy for years and years. And then when I started the spiritual self-mastery, very quickly it just shifted. So um I think, yeah, for me, and maybe there's something around, again, not judging ourselves for our reactions, and holding that in compassion, and asking for support. I think that's a really big one. Again, I think that's what um the sort of spiritual connection has given me, is this deeper belief that um that things are unfolding as they should, that I'm not alone, that there is always support out there for me. Um and that, yeah, and I guess a deeper sense of trust. So um yeah, I'm saying this and I'm like, oh yeah, I really need to listen to this this advice myself. I guess that's the gift, isn't it? When you're sharing and you're trying to teach others, then you're like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I
Yeah.
see the truth for me too. Yeah.
Yeah, relationships are such a big gift in so many ways. And I can imagine, when you're listening, um, I think romantic relationships for many people are, such a big trigger as well, whether you are in a romantic relationship or whether you're not. And because I remember before my relationship with JP, now being single, I even that, like caused triggers within. I was triggered then as well, in a way that I guess it's more cultural, in like what is expected, and do you hold on to those beliefs, collective beliefs, what is expected at a certain age, that you have to have it quote unquote have it all together. You know, those can be also triggers in relationship to others, I think, as well. Um, Maybe holding it, like for myself, for example, for a long time I've held on to this belief that by a certain age I was going to get married and have children, um and not having that at that age um caused, you know, trigger within me. Then starting to date other people and then being triggered with that, you know, because then my self-worth and self-acceptance would really come up as a theme in dating other people and how I would present myself and express myself. But then, of course, once we do choose to, well, we do make a choice for a specific romantic relationship, or even, you know, there's also people that have multiple romantic relationships. It will always be a reflection of the energy that we hold within as well. And I think it's just by divine design that we human beings sort of create this. Um, Yet it also causes us to create so much struggle, you know, how much struggle we create on this romantic relationship part of things. Yeah, it's interesting. I think you shared before that for you, like Tom and you're not so triggered by Tom, am I right? Or is it?
No, we're not massively. I mean, we struggled when Ren was born more. I think that
Mhm.
was when, you know, our relationship shifted so much. Um, yeah, I'm really sort of, he's really my safe place.
Mm,
And yeah, I mean, I don't feel that I had a lot of healthy relationships modeled to me, actually. So I had this belief going into the relationship that it was doomed. And then we'd been together a while when I was having some therapy, and I sort of expressed that fear to my therapist, and she said, well, why do you think that? I mean, do you have a healthy relationship now? And I was like, well, yeah, I think so. And she was like, well, then you know how to do it. And interestingly, I'm reading a really good book at the moment called Conscious Loving, which is about relationships, and they talk about these co-commitments. And one of them is, so there are 6 co-commitments, and the book explores them in depth. It's an amazing book if you are struggling in relationships. And one of the co-commitments is that you are committed to the belief that you are 100% responsible for your own experience of life, which I love. I mean, I resonate with that so much. And I think one of the things that I really feel with Tom and I is that if I'm struggling with something in my life, I'm not always looking for him to fix it. And in the relationships that I saw as a child, in the grown up romantic relationships I saw, there was always sort of this expectation that the other person would swoop in and rescue, you know. And I think fairy tales really don't help that
mm,
sort of cultural belief that we have that once we're in a relationship we're sort of saved. And I feel I've never projected that onto Tom, and he's never projected that onto me either. um I mean, we do have our struggles, of course we do. um you know, but we're so aligned with our values, but we also are very different. You know,
mm,
Tom is not highly sensitive, and you know, I think I've shared before, he is just like this all the time. And I'm like, woo,
mm.
you know. So blessing life with me is a roller coaster. Um, but he is so accepting of who I am.
Mm.
Um, Yeah, and he sort of just takes the bait. Oh, here she goes again with another wild idea. Um, Yeah, so I'm really blessed in that regard, but it's not to say that I don't struggle in relationships because I absolutely do struggle in a lot of other
Yeah.
relationships.
Yeah, I also do honestly believe that, we how do I say that? We are all having different triggers because that is perfect for us. So for
Yeah.
you in this lifetime, it might not be within the romantic relationship that you are triggered so much,
Mm.
but more so in other relationships. And there will be people listening, that are like, yeah, romantic relationships in my life are such a massive struggle, and I have so much learning still in that. Um but yeah, for other people, it's more on the family side of things, or it's more in the friendship
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it will be different for everyone, yet similar in a way that it's always a reflection of our own energy.
Mhm.
That's, I guess, the biggest thing. Yeah. I guess, yeah, what you said, when you become parents in within romantic relationship, you get children, those first sort of years is that's where we're at right now. It's such a massive transition because the whole family system is kind of shaken, really. There's another being entering the family system. So yeah, it's of course, things are changing because you relate then to each other differently again, and all the energy sort of goes into caring for that new being entering the world, and there's less energy than left for each other in that phase of our lives. Yeah, I think by now, I'm sort of more accepting of it because I think I've embodied more of the law of relativity. And the law of relativity is really about that any phase is relative. There's a phase of winter, and there will be a phase then a season of summer again. And I think I've come to a much deeper embrace of the cycles of life and the seasons in life. And therefore, I know and I trust that this will change. If there's one constant, it's that life will change.
Yeah.
And doesn't mean that we don't have our challenges right now, because we do. We have so little time for each other within the day, both working, JP working a crazy amount of hours, like 40 plus hours, if not 50 plus. Me running my own business and then having 3 children and a dog to look after. Um, that's really busy. That's really, really busy. So there's very little time that we spend together right now connecting. Um, So that at the moment, that is a challenge, and that is probably a trigger for both of us. I think the way we try and navigate through that is really, I think, the difference with relationships before JP is that now we are in a relationship where we are taking responsibility of how we feel, what you just shared before as well. And then if we do notice that we are disconnected, we mention that, we talk about it. Not to say that that is always easy, because I still also hold, I think, beliefs around being afraid to burden the other with my feeling of disconnect or overwhelm when that is the case. And I think the other way around, JP has that as well. So then, of course, us holding back and sharing is not benefiting the relationship at all. And we're learning that, in step by step, we're learning that in the end, it will always serve us in the highest to share how we're feeling. And then it's to learn for the other person not to jump into that rescuer or fixer energy, because then we're both sitting on the karmic cycle, and that's only reinforcing the unresolved energy. So I think that's, in the end, for everyone in relationship to another, we're learning where and if we are sitting on that karmic cycle, whether we're being the victim, the rescuer, the persecuted one, the one that feels alone and not enough and blamed, or whether we are jumping into that warrior kind of energy, like, oh, we need to work harder and push through. The moment we become aware that we're sitting on that cycle, we do then also have the possibility to jump off that wheel and actually lift the potential of, of our way of relating to each other. Because that's where, if we are sitting on the cycle, we meet really child to child. That's how I see it. Like, it's inner child meeting inner child from a wounded inner child.
Yeah.
And it's only recently, for example, that I've also learned about the first couple of months of JP's life, because when Lily was born, we then started talking about, oh, how was your birth actually? Do you know, like, from stories from your mum and dad, like anything about the first bit of your life? And knowing that, I can then, in relationship with him, also see us sometimes meeting each other from those wounds, from the trauma that we've had growing up. And the learning is constantly to then acknowledge that, to come back within. A tool that I use is to simply lie in bed, because I don't have enough, I don't have, not enough, like, I don't have a lot of time in the day to sit in meditation at the moment. So when I go to bed, I lie down, I connect with my heart, I breathe in my heart space. And then I just call upon little Renska, really, and I just send her loving kindness, and just reassuring her that she's safe, she's held, she's loved. And then the next day, I can meet JP from a different energy again. And sometimes it only needs one connection with my inner child, but sometimes it also takes a lot more. Then it takes me a couple weeks before I can meet him at that level. But I think that's, if you're looking for a healthy romantic relationship, then that is, in my opinion, what you're looking for, that you're both able to take responsibility for how you're feeling, and what you're experiencing.
I think whenever Tom and I have struggled, it's always because we've both been speaking to one another from a child place. And it's like, you can't expect two children to sort it out, right?
No.
And one of the things that we have been working on when we do come up against struggles is to stay in that grounded place, that adult place. And I think one of the things, again, even through reading this book, that they talk about is about just speaking your microscopic truth, which is, it could be, at the moment, I feel really unsafe here. Because actually that is an inarguable truth. You can't, when you speak your microscopic truth, or I am feeling really upset, or I am feeling, whatever it is that you are feeling, rather than you're making me feel this, or you did this, or blaming, or, shaming. When you speak your microscopic truth, which is the real deep truth of what you're experiencing, then that is inarguable. And I think, one of the really powerful things I've done recently is I created an image of myself, my adult self, holding my child self. And that has been really, it's a screensaver on my phone, and that's been really powerful. But it's also then to remember to sort of have the image of Tom as a child in my mind in those situations as well, the stuff that, that he perhaps no one has this perfect childhood, do they? So the stuff from his childhood that's coming up, and to hold little Tom in compassion. I love that, little Renska, little JP. It's yeah, such a sort of amazing thing to hold.
Can definitely be a tool in itself, that when we are
Mm,
triggered or when another person is triggered, that we just visualize them as a child. That really helps me to come back to a place of compassion. Though I have to say, it can sometimes still be a challenge as well. Like it's still a lesson that I'm learning, where I'm sometimes now confused when JP, for example, shares that he doesn't feel heard or he feels judged. Um, then I sometimes still struggle how to respond to that, because of course I hear him saying that, and I validate, that he's feeling that way, um, even though it's not my perspective, or even though I don't feel that I'm judging, or I don't feel that I'm not listening. It's kind of like yeah, he has his perspective, I have my perspective, and they're not aligned, so they're not the same. So sometimes it's then, of course, also, can we agree to disagree? And that's then fine. Um, and sometimes I do still then go into fixer, rescuer, and and then I start, trying to give him to bring him solutions, like,
yeah.
oh, have you tried this or have you done that? And blah, 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 blah. And then I realized, like, oh, wait a minute, Rensky, you don't have to fix it. Or I start asking straight away, what do you need? Where he doesn't even know what he needs right then. So that's where I sometimes struggle for words, probably, and that's probably more my insecurity than, like, oh, am I being enough as a partner, as a wife? Like, am I holding enough space for him? Am I listening enough? Am I, making sure that he's heard and seen? And that's then also coming from little Renska still.
Yeah, back to the law of back to the law of reflection again.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, that's then he reflects for me that I'm not feeling enough. Yeah, so it's a constant learning. So I'm not at all saying, that's, I guess, why I'm sharing, I'm not at all saying that I'm at a certain level of mastery, high level of mastery in that. The only
No,
thing
so
I know is that within our relationship, we always have the willingness to move forward together. So even though it takes us sometimes a couple of days to come back to that value of, like, the value of growth and the value of compassion and love, um, that's where we will come back to, and we will meet each other there. And I think that the biggest thing for me is to learn to trust that we will come
uh,
back there. And yeah, it really, within relationship, the biggest thing is to take that radical responsibility, because in the end, every relationship is a reflection of the relationship we have with ourselves. So when we start to love and accept ourselves more, automatically that becomes easy to do with other people as well. That's just simply how the universe works, how energy works. Yeah, and we need experiences in that, I think, to be able to trust that that is how it works.
uh,
Yeah.
I think for me, there's one sort of final point, and that was, just coming back to what you said about you know and trust that both you and JP are sort of committed to your own growth, and to making it work. And I guess that's one of the things that's come up around these co-commitments in relationship, really, is, well, what if my partner isn't on that page? And this isn't just necessarily in a romantic relationship as well, but sort of the same thing for with my dad, really. And then it's about your boundaries and what is your
Yeah.
boundary.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that by taking radical responsibility doesn't mean that it is all on you to find a complete solution to make that relationship work. With my dad now, it's so radically different, but I've also put in a lot of boundaries about how much he's in my life.
Yeah.
And I think, around romantic relationships, if your partner isn't willing to meet you there, then ultimately you have a choice. Then either you can stay in that situation and you can continue to show up from that sort of committed place of radical responsibility, or you have another choice as well, which is to leave the relationship. And I think it's hard to hear that, but I do think that within this whole conversation, the boundary element is also important. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that choice, what is really important in that choice is that you come from this place of clarity and love.
Yeah.
Um, so how do you know whether to leave or stay in a relationship, you know? Um, I've had this crossroads actually with JP before Lily came into the world. Um, I've sat on this crossroads with him where I was in doubt whether we would stay together or whether it was in the highest to break up. And I think the biggest learning from then was that the reflection of the relationship was that I was doubting, like I held doubt within my field. So every choice I was going to make from that frequency of doubt was not in my highest potential, whether I would stay from doubt or whether I would leave from doubt. It's never in my highest potential because it's separation energy, it's fear, um, it's distrust, of my own intuition, of my own guidance. So, what I did was nothing else but sitting in lots of receiving meditations, lots of voidal meditations where we just go into heart space, receive and be. And the process, the learning really was that I can trust that I will know what to do when it's the right timing. When it
Yeah.
was really this trust, learning this trust in divine timing of my guidance of what to choose. And that whenever I have doubt, and whenever I'm trying to rationalize what to choose, it always comes from my ego will, and it's never divine guidance. It's never spiritual guidance. And that's, I think, if you are listening and you are, on this crossroads, like how do I make a choice of setting a boundary? Not necessarily even in romantic relationship, even within family or friendship or with co-workers, colleagues. How do I know when to set a boundary, um, and how to make that choice? I think what's really important is that we set the boundary from love and not from fear, and that's where you need to reflect upon, do I set this boundary be, because I'm afraid of being judged and not accepted? I'm afraid I'm not enough. I'm afraid that I lack in life. um I'm I'm afraid I'm not safe, and therefore I set the boundary.
Mm.
Or can I come back and actually hold that part and then set a boundary from actually a loving um, place within me? I think then a boundary feels very different. At least to me, the boundary feels then very different.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, agreed. Okay. Anything else you wanted to share, or should we go to our choice box?
Thinking about a joy spark, I don't don't have one just yet. Do you have one at the moment?
Yeah, I have just a very sweet, simple one.
Mm-hmm.
Just Bren and I were just at home the other day, and singing is quite a big part of our life.
Mm.
I've got two friends that are part of this beautiful singing network here in the UK, and I don't go currently because I'm doing quite a lot. But they have a singing group, and they teach these very simple, beautiful songs that are just very sort of connected to spirituality or nature or, community. They're beautiful. And so, yeah, so we often sing those songs. But the other day, Van was just in her little playroom next door, and she was painting on her blackboard. She's got like a big blackboard thing. She was doing something, and she was singing, "I've got peace like a river in my soul." And it was just one of those moments I was sort of observing her from the other room through the door. And it was just one of those moments where I just thought, it's just so beautiful to see. She's a really good singer, and she's come to me to some of these singing groups as well. But yeah, it was just a moment where my heart was sort of just bursting really with sort of love and gratitude. Yeah, I sort of was like, that's a joy spark for the podcast.
Yeah, so precious, so beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that. Joy Spark, I think to highlight the other side of reflection of relationships. It's not just that relationships are reflecting, our shadows. It's also that our relationships also reflect our light. And I see that so much in our three girls. Like the moment Isla and Lana, Lily's big sisters, walk into the room, she lights up. Lily lights up. Like she's like, wow, like my sisters, and that every time that is a joy spark for me, like how much they reflect her light as well. Like that's just so precious to see. And that was it doesn't like it happens multiple times a day, but like they're little joy sparks for me, the way Lily responds to her sisters. Yeah, so that's really beautiful to see. So that's mine for today. Yeah.
That's so lovely. Yeah. And then lighting up you as well, because then you have that reaction.
Yeah, I have that reaction too. Yeah, from that connection as well. So I think it's also sort of really important to understand that relationships are not just reflecting what's hard, but it's really also reflecting the light within us. Yeah, it's really reflecting the light. And the more we do work with the shadow, of course, the lighter our relationships will also feel, and the more we attract relationships that will highlight and reflect the light within us, because we are clearing out our field and there's more light in our field. So therefore our relationships become lighter and lighter as well. Yeah.
Okay, should we ground and anchor? We'll soon take a short moment to ground and anchor together. If this conversation resonated and you'd like to go a little deeper, we'd love to welcome you into our Joy Circle, a monthly newsletter where we share extra reflections, meditations, and resources to support you. You can find us on Instagram at School of Joy Podcast, and we'd love for you to support us on our mission to spread more light and joy in the world by sharing with family and friends. You'll find all the links in the episode description. Thanks again for listening. Okay, so just inviting you to close your eyes and take some beautiful deep breaths. And just focusing on this spark of light deep in our heart. and just allowing it to expand with every breath. And as we do so, just honoring all that we are, all that we choose to create, and for showing up and doing this work. And holding ourselves in so much gratitude.